Since agriculture first was utilized thousands of years ago, humans have been devoting ever more land towards our use. We are currently experiencing a major global extinction event, to which habitat loss is the largest contributing factor. Many natural ecosystems have been converted into farmland, and we now use as much as 31% of net primary productivity from Earth's terrestrial ecosystems to grow crops and feed livestock. Although human ingenuity has allowed us to produce food more efficiently than in our past, we are greater in number, and everywhere we push other species to the boundaries of their ability to survive. Due to the current mass extinction, humans have tried to conserve many plants and animals. For these efforts to be successful, we need to acknowledge a correlation between habitat loss and population extinction. All the available evidence indicates that there is a threshold for habitat loss, beyond which only a small additional loss of habitat will increase the likelihood of extinction from close to zero to close to 100%. Animals and plants need large tracts of uninterrupted land to maintain healthy population numbers. The exchange of genetic materials between differing populations of the same species creates enough diversity to withstand large stressor events. Without this natural creation of diversity, populations become more vulnerable to extinction. Although a population may not become immediately extinct, there's still a much higher chance of extinction with lower population numbers. In general, the lifetime of any population grows in relation to increases in the number of individuals. However, this pattern does not hold if the environment is changed greatly. Vast amounts of water are used for modern agriculture, thus reducing the amount available to freshwater ecosystems. In some cases, this can lead to desertification, causing ecosystems to become less productive and in essence harming ourselves. In some areas, our water use is so severe that a total loss of an aquatic ecosystem occurs. Our use of water in the Colorado River Delta is one such case. It should look similar to the Nile Delta. However, it actually looks like this. We change the environment in a number of ways. However, agriculture is the most significant and has the farthest reaching repercussions. To summarize, agriculture is the main reason for habitat conversion, and smaller populations are affected to a greater extent than larger populations. Genetic engineering is the deliberate modification of the characteristics of an organism by manipulating its genetic material. The goal of genetic engineering in agriculture is to improve the fitness of plants by giving them the ability to increase efficiency of photosynthesis and increase the resistance against viruses, drought, and salinity. However, research has shown that in agriculture the pros are outweighed by the cons. Introducing new species of organisms into the environment could have long-term effects on wildlife, plants, and insects. Passing on the newly incorporated genes to the organisms could change that particular species' role in the environment. This change in interactions can completely alter the function of the ecosystem. Originally, genetically engineered crops were introduced to reduce the use of pesticides on farmland by introducing the idea of herbicide-tolerant crops, also known as HT crops. It was believed that HT crops could only require one application of pesticide. However, this did not seem to be the case because the most beneficial time for pesticide application on crops is later in the season, which resulted in the growth of weeds and thus led to multiple applications of pesticide. Unfortunately, the weeds that were originally being controlled by HT crops began to develop a resistance against herbicides due to overexposure to such chemicals. Superweeds are being developed as a result. To solve this problem, farmers are turning to more toxic herbicides in order to control the superweeds. Such toxins have a negative effect on the environment. One of the greatest ways genetic engineering has impacted agriculture is through contamination. This is caused by the pollen from a GE crop being carried by wind or animals into areas of non-GE crops. The biggest case of contamination was found in Saskatchewan canola. As a result of contamination, every organic farmer systematically lost their organic status for canola. Genetic engineering is only one mechanism used to improve plant productivity. Fertilizer is another application that improves plant growth. In summary, there are more negative effects than positive effects due to the introduction of GMO crops. Some of the negative effects are cross-contamination and the growth of superweeds due to the excess application of fertilizers and pesticides. Due to an increase in the global population, the pressures to have enough resources for the general populace is growing. Because of this, fertilizers predominantly used in the agriculture industry to sustain crop and plant growth and to provide enough nutrients for them to thrive in nutrient-deprived environments. However, this excess use of fertilizer has many negative impacts on the environment. Cultural eutrophication and hypoxia are examples of these impacts. As more fertilizer is being produced, greenhouse gas emissions from the factories are also increasing. First, let's talk about cultural eutrophication. Eutrophication occurs when large amounts of nutrients find their way into water bodies that are nutrient deficient. This results in excessive aquatic plant growth such as algae. Cultural eutrophication is when eutrophication is sped up by human impact. The main cause is runoff from nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers. It can have major effects on the aquatic habitat it occurs in. This includes increases in plant biomass, development of anoxic or hypoxic conditions, a change in the biodiversity, and an increase in the frequency of algal blooms. The frequency of algal blooms and an increase in plant biomass cause the anoxic or hypoxic conditions, which in turn affects the biodiversity of the habitat. When the plants and algae die, their remains sink to the bottom of the water body and are consumed by bacteria. The consumption results in a decrease of oxygen near the bottom of the water and creates anoxic or hypoxic conditions. If the water becomes anoxic, then there's virtually no oxygen, and hypoxic means there's just a decrease in oxygen. Hypoxia has many negative environmental impacts. The low oxygen levels create a hotspot for anaerobic bacteria, and they often produce foul-smelling compounds such as H2S, RSH, and NH3. The low oxygen levels can also cause fish kills, which disrupt the ecosystem. Mobile fish may be able to survive hypoxic environments, but immobile animals cannot move to the environments with more oxygen and are often killed. What about greenhouse gas emissions? The fertilizer industry has two different areas of emissions. One is downstream, which concerns the actual production of the fertilizers, and the other is upstream, which includes the transportation and application of fertilizers. In ammonia production, natural gas is used for steam reforming as a source of hydrogen. This leads to high CO2 emissions. In nitric acid production, nitrous oxide, nitric oxide, and nitrogen dioxide are released. Nitrous oxide is one of the most dangerous greenhouse gases emitted. It has a global warming potential 310 times greater than CO2. The CO2 emitted from the production of urea contributes to the vast majority of greenhouse gases. The trouble with this is that urea accounts for nearly 50% of world nitrogen fertilizer production. With all of these negative impacts, why do we even bother with fertilizer? Fertilizer use is important, not only to ensure there is enough food, but it also prevents insufficient crop nutrition, which leads to soil degradation. This low fertility prevents crop cover from growing, leaving land exposed to erosion. In summary, the use of fertilizer results in greenhouse gas emissions and eutrophication. Eutrophication has many negative environmental impacts, such as a decrease in biodiversity and an introduction of anoxic and hypoxic conditions. Erosion is characterized by the loss of topsoil and results in the reduction of organic matter in the soil. However, erosion can be mediated by the application of fertilizer. Studies have compared the application of manure and that of fertilizer and found that the application of manure increased productivity greatly because it added organic matter to the soil. In comparison, the application of fertilizer did not increase productivity due to the fact that the phosphorus formed a complex with calcium carbonate and made the phosphorus unavailable for uptake by the soil. Erosion can occur for a number of reasons: salinization, tillage, water, wind, loss of organic matter, and soil compaction. To discuss a few of these problems, salinity can occur due to evaporation of water, which occurs often in Saskatchewan. Tillage, or overcultivating, will cause bare soils and make the soil susceptible to wind and splash erosion, where splash erosion and wind lead to the loss of topsoil. Furthermore, crops such as canola, soybean, potatoes, and corn do not provide adequate soil coverage and lead to erosion. Sadly, we do not have practices in place to compensate for this problem. However, soil erosion has been reduced dramatically due to implementation of no-till and reduced summer fallow. No-till leaves stubble in the soil and prevents the loss of topsoil by wind and water. Summer fallow is leaving a field unplanted and allowing the wind and water erosion to occur, but the reduction in summer fallow reduces soil erosion. However, there still needs to be practices implemented to compensate for crops and provide minimal soil coverage. In summary, soil erosion decreases productivity and occurs due to many factors, mainly wind and water. In conclusion, many practices need to be implemented to provide sustainable agriculture.